Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked here on the channel. This is the series where I talk about every single book on my shelves because there's a traction city coming towards me ready to eat me. Today we are talking about Philip Reeve's Night Flights and the whole Mortal Engines series in general. So I'm filming this in November, right at the end of November of 2022, and I'm fully aware that I have put pretty much every other book in this series with this art style on my Christmas wish list. I may have more copies of the books by that point, which is why I'm trying to cover Mortal Engines in general. Just, this is the only book I own at the moment. So if you're wondering why I'm not holding up and talking about every single book in its specificity, that's kind of why I'm getting around it that way. I have read the full series before though, so I'm not talking out of my butt completely. But before we do start, I did buy this copy of this book myself. Nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible for the series as a whole. If you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, this is not a video for you. Please click away. But if you just want like maybe vague ideas about what might happen, this is fine. And lastly, I will include the story graph for the series below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. This is a series written by Philip Reeve, and this particular edition also has illustrations by Ian McHugh. They're absolutely beautiful illustrations. I'm not going to dwell on it too much because I know some people prefer to read things in ebook and like the illustrations aren't the meat of the book, but there are some really, really beautiful pieces of art in this book. If you are wondering whether to buy a copy specifically of Night Flights, I'm going to put it behind me though so that we don't get totally bogged down in me just talking about that. Night Flights is the most recent published work in the Mortal Engines series as far as I'm aware, and it originally came out in 2018, which is when I purchased a copy. However, the first Mortal Engines book, Mortal Engines, came out in 2001. It is a young adult / older middle grade series. It kind of sits in a similar place to where I would put something like the older, later books of the Edge Chronicles. It's not fully middle grade, but it's not YA in the same sense as a lot of the other YA that I've reviewed on this channel has been. And I would say it is sci-fi in that kind of way that industrial kind of futuristics, but not in like a sleek way, like in a gritty industrial, not steampunk exactly, but we're brushing up against it kind of series. Genre words are hard, but do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. If you don't know who Philip Reeve is already, he is a British author and illustrator of children's books. I've read a number of his works. The ones that I've read the most of are Mortal Engines. There we go. You can look him up if you want to. So at some point in the history of this world, our world, in fact, there was a 60 minutes war that in that 60 minutes brought such devastation that it pretty much destroyed everything and caused cities to put themselves up on wheels, on skis, on tank tracks, on rafts in some instances, and sort of take to moving around. And as they move around in order to get by, in order to get resources, they eat other cities. And these become known as traction cities, and the system of kind of the way the world is working is known as municipal Darwinism, which we have municipal, we have cities, we have survival of the fittest, the Darwinism idea. The main Mortal Engines series follows Tom Natsworthy, who works in the museum in London and gets caught up in a big conspiracy, and it's a kind of sprawling action series. Then there is a spin-off series that has other characters doing other things, and then we have this, which is a spin-off novella, which is some prequel stories about one of the characters in the series, who in fairness is very cool, and I did want more stories about, so I'm not mad at adding an extra book. What I've actually written in my notes is Tom Natsworthy, main character, becoming part of a conspiracy, as YA heroes do, along with the mysterious Hester, who is the female character of the duo. My first pro for the Mortal Engines series in general is that this is a very cool world. It's a very cool idea. I feel like 2001, the world was rich with ideas that were happening. I really like the concept of municipal Darwinism. I really like the way that Philip Reeve creates a world where kind of all the different variations of that might come about. We've got kind of underwater cities, we've got cities on top of the water, we've got cities that are moving around, we've got the idea of scavenger cities or small towns. It's all in there, and it really feels like Philip Reeve took the time to sit and go, what do I actually want to create? And while it definitely does feel like some things get brought in later books because he thought of them and they would be cool, they never feel like they could never have been there before, which can happen with sprawling series. So yeah, if you're looking for a really cool world with a lot of books to explore that world in, this is definitely a winner. I can't remember exactly how many books there are off the top of my head. It feels like the kind of thing I should have written down before doing this video, but editing Judith is going to supply that number. And you can read them all, and they are also in most libraries if you have library access, especially in the UK because Philip Reeve is like a well-known author here. I read all of them on Libby, I think, on the library's ebook app a few years ago, so you can read them. It should not cost you too much money. You don't need to go out and buy them all. Always a win as well. I think that Philip Reeve really took the opportunity to build on characters throughout the series as well. So we have Hester and Tom as our main duo, but there are other side characters and interesting identities within there, both in the protagonist side of things, the antagonist, the morally grey, and I think that Night Flights actually really exemplifies that, in that this basically came about because Philip Reeve loved the actor who played the character about this Anna Fang so much in the film that he was like, right, we need more stories about this person. Although this published before the film came out, so it's a complicated chicken egg scenario. I really appreciate that ability to get to know characters more, and actually I really enjoy a lot of the characters in this. Tom has a little bit of main character, I'm just being swept up in all of this, I am but a lad from London kind of energy, but that's fine, I can get past it, and I really liked Hester as a character. Hester is the kind of person that, had I read this series as a teenager, as an actual young adult, is particularly at the younger end of that, I would have been utterly obsessed. I would have wanted to be Hester for Halloween if my parents had let me celebrate Halloween. I kind of touched on this in the world building, but I think I want to touch on it again, the detail of the world, and not just in the municipal Darwinism, but also the detail of how cities are constructed and how airships are constructed. It feels like a very meticulously thought out world, but also the individual settings and scenes within that have a lot of detail in them. Like, they paint a really vivid picture. Night Flights is the one I've read most recently because I reread it for this video, but I definitely got the sense of the kind of belly of the beast of these cities, and the difference between the lower classes and the upper classes, and the danger of the traction cities really comes through. I think that rich description really carried me through, because when you're not as fussed about like Tom's journey specifically, I just wanted to see more of the world and see more of the places and encounter more of the settings within the world. I definitely got that in this series. So yeah, one thing I have touched on is that in some ways there are some kind of basic things going on. Is it basic, or was it 2001 and hadn't been done yet and has since been built on? We can argue about that till the cows come home. I think that if you are a person who's read an awful lot of stories of this kind, you'll find yourself finding familiarity in there. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's just something worth noting, and I think that enough of it feels very different from other things because of the setting and because of the ideas that it isn't too much of a bother. I think it's worth noting though, in case you're the kind of person where as soon as you encounter something that feels very tropey in terms of the character journey, you just switch off, you might not enjoy this. I also want to recognise that this did come out in 2001, and while the later books obviously we're looking at 2018, it's much more recent. I haven't read them recently enough to know how dated some elements of it are, and I think often the biggest thing you actually find in children's books of this era, and Edge Chronicles is another one, I keep bringing it up because I also really want to reread them. Actually, fat phobia, I find more often than not. I can't say for certain that it happens in this series, but like that would be my guess, and I'm sure someone on the story graph will have pointed it out if it is there. So yes, potentially a bit dated, we have to recognise they're from 2001. The last thing I'll say is that potentially there's more than you need in the series. I remember getting towards the end and thinking like, actually, did I need this spin-off series? Did I need Night Flights? I don't think you need any of it. You know, what is need? What is a book that we need? I don't know. But I think that the original Mortal Engines book is very, very solid, and kind of going out from there, you do get a little bit kind of like, okay, well, could we just deal with the problem? What more is there to know? So perhaps if you're the person who gets burned out on a series very quickly, that might be the case. I don't know. Should we do a reread together after Christmas once the books are in? I mean, it will be after Christmas by the time you're watching this. I'm getting chaotic. I need to stop talking. The other thing I will say is either if you have watched the film and you didn't like it, these are much better than the film. And if you haven't watched the film yet, just don't. Peter Jackson did a very good job, I think, of creating the aesthetic of the world and creating some really exciting big moments, but in terms of actually translating the books to the screen, they are not good, and in terms of the actual writing of the screenplay, it is terrible. And I watched it and I was very, very sad, mostly because just it's such bad writing. It's actually, I could talk about it all day, but it would involve spoiling elements of the books, and I don't want to do that. But it is one of the worst written films I have watched that wasn't like an intentionally bad like Netflix rom-com, you know? I mentioned Edge Chronicles as a kind of comparison to this. I don't think they are super duper duper similar, but they have a similar nostalgia for me, even though I read Edge Chronicles as an actual child and I read this as a new adult, I guess. I would also maybe mention Garth Nick's Old Kingdom series in terms of that books that feature the same world at different times, and also they have similar questy energy, I think, and characters getting in over their heads, that kind of thing, and that in-depth world. I was picking up on a vibe. We're going on vibes alone, Old Kingdom. And another series that I'm planning on rereading next year. Should you read these? Are they worth reading? Specifically Night Flights, I would say if you like the series already and you haven't read Night Flights yet because it had been such a gap between, read it. It's a good story. It's an enjoyable addition. As a series as a whole, I would say if you are on board with the ideas, I think they are really good fun. I think that they are an interesting world, and I kind of don't necessarily want to say like, absolutely, they're the best thing ever until I've done a reread because my reading tastes have changed so much in the last 2 years. But overall, I remember really enjoying them and I am excited to get to reread them. And that's something that doesn't always happen. Sometimes I'm done. Sometimes I don't want to. But this time I think I'm ready. Have you read these? Do you have plans to? Is there anything you remember really sticking with you? Did you also hate the film? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord where we have chill chats about books. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon and get early access to videos, exclusive content, and live streams. If you would like to join their number, that's linked in the description as well. You can go and click that link. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one.
There's gonna be some bloopers now.
And the difference between the lower classes and the up.